Hey guys, and welcome to the first ever Fantasy Points XFL breakdown. I'm your host, Jake Tribbey, and I've got Chris Wecht here by my side to help us break down every angle of the Week 2 XFL slate. Chris, how are you doing today, bud?
Doing great. I mean, breaking down some XFL football for week 2 with the newly anointed football writer of the year, Jake Tribbey. Congratulations. Excited to be here with you.
I really appreciate it, man. It was certainly a surprise, and if I got to be honest, I have spent just an incredible amount of time over the last 18 or so hours just saying, thankful and thank you and how grateful I am. And yeah, it's really cool, totally unexpected. So was super happy to see that. But I mean, man, we've got football tonight, which I just think is so awesome. I mean, I love DFS, I love football, so I just think, this rocks. I'm a huge fan of spring football, and I'm ready to get into these games, man. So first up, tonight at 9 p.m., we have the St. Louis Battlehawks at the Seattle Sea Dragons. The over-under here is 36.5. Seattle is favored by 3.5 points. Starting things off on the St. Louis side, A.J. McCarron is certainly interesting. The Battlehawks just didn't do anything in the first, maybe 90% of that game against San Antonio. But, once they got into 2-minute drill and really started, just focusing on throwing the rock, McCarron actually looked really good. And he's, I wrote it up in the article, the Week 2 XFL tournament plays article, just saying like, hey, he's clearly overpriced. He's probably going to be quarterback 4, quarterback 5 in terms of ownership. I think that there is a potential leverage opportunity there. He's pretty far from being my favorite quarterback play, but I think he's a little interesting. Do you have any thoughts on McCarron?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with what you said. He comes off as like fine to me. He doesn't project super well. Like you said, he's a little bit overpriced, but this is also a week, as we can expect many of these weeks to be, where salary isn't really an issue in terms of fitting guys in.
Yep.
So he's definitely a guy you can get in. He's probably most of the quarterbacks, the top 3 or 4 or so, are really clumped in ownership. So McCarron kind of looks like probably my favorite, like just pure leverage play at QB, as a guy that you're going to get, 10 to 15% ownership. And, he's got a ceiling to him in general. And, maybe this game shoots out a little bit and McCarron is a decent play.
Yeah, I think that's definitely another reason to like McCarron a little bit, is that, Seattle's going to throw 80% of the time. They could definitely put some points up on the board, and St. Louis, they are underdogs. So that could definitely force them into more of a pass happy approach. But, we could also just see the offensive incompetence that we saw for,
Yes.
like I said, I mean, 95% of that game against San Antonio. So I certainly wouldn't go overboard with McCarron. Moving down the Battlehawks roster a little bit, I think Brian Hill is a great play. I mean, he's pretty clearly, I think, the second best running back play of the slate. He was their bell cow in the first quarter until he hurt his hamstring. He came back near the tail end of the third quarter and was yet again the bell cow. He got almost every snap when they were in their 2-minute drill near the end of that game. So Brian Hill looks really nice, and there's no reason to be concerned about the hamstring injury because he did log a full practice last I saw on the injury report. So I'm not sure if you have any more thoughts on the running back situation, but I think Hill's really great.
Yeah, I think you pretty much covered. He's my favorite running back play of the more popular guys.
Yeah. And then these Battlehawks wide receivers, I actually think are pretty interesting because I don't think they're going to catch much ownership. I mean, you have Austin Prohl, who's only 4,400. He's going to be the highest owned guy there. Darius Shepard and Marcel Aitman are both pretty talented outside wide receivers. And, I wrote up Aitman as a strong leverage play because he just, he doesn't project well. He's very clearly overpriced, but because there's so much wide receiver value on the board, which, we'll get to a little bit later, he's a really easy guy to get up to. And I kind of think, just based on watching the game and stuff, that St. Louis wants him to be their alpha, down the field and in the red zone. I think they threw him an end zone fade that didn't quite get there. And, they had some nice downfield throws his way. So I really like Aitman as a leverage play because he might only be 5% owned.
Yeah, Aitman, he had more than double. He had more than double the air yard share of any other receiver on the team. He had 2 red zone targets, 1 inside the 10. So he's definitely their preferred alpha receiver and a good GPP play at that. He, like we said, that you're betting on an offense that really struggled last week, though. So he's not. There's a reason that he's not going to be super popular.
Yeah.
But definitely is a guy that has a ceiling to him, and what makes him a good GPP play.
That, I mean, the Aitman McCarron stack, like you can pretty much go all chalk otherwise and have like a totally unique team. So that's definitely something I like.
Yeah. Austin Prohl, I do like a lot. He's actually, I don't know if you caught this on they said it on the broadcast last week. He's the son of their wide receivers coach.
Yeah.
So
throw back to youth football. The dads love playing their sons.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can't ask for much more in a spring football than your son playing for you, and you try to make sure he gets the ball. He's exactly. Basically their slot receiver, which we know is typically an easier place for receivers to line up. Mm-hmm. He was also getting some red zone. He caught the 3-point conversion, right, to give them the lead last week.
And the game-winning touchdown. And he caught the 4th and 15 because in the XFL you can go for a 4th and 15 instead of an onside kick. So it may have just been coincidence, but in like 3 very clutch, high leverage situations, they went his way. So that may say something about how much they value him as a wide receiver.
Yeah, I think he makes a ton of sense as a way to get out of that super cheap 3K wide receiver range, and you pay up a little bit in that 4K range because you're most likely gonna have the money to do it anyway.
Mm-hmm. And I think because a lot of those 3K guys are just such glaring values, you won't see Prohl catch a ton of ownership. He'll be kind of moderately popular, maybe 10, 12%, nothing crazy.
Yep.
So unless you have any other thoughts on the St. Louis side, I think I'm ready to move on to Seattle here.
Yep, I'm good.
All right. So Seattle, I mean, you could not dream of a more high volume passing offense. Ben DiNucci with, I believe, 57 dropbacks last week, which is just insane. It was 10 more than Brandon Silvers. I think almost 20 more, or maybe 27 more than Drew Plitt. I mean, just an insane amount of volume there. His ADOT wasn't very high. I mean, it seems like this Seattle offense really wants to focus on like short area stuff to the slot. But I mean, it really doesn't matter if DiNucci's not even that good because the passing volume is just so incredible. So DiNucci is, there's a top tier of quarterback plays to me, and it's very clearly, DiNucci and then Brandon Silvers, who we will talk about a little bit later. And I'm going to play a lot of DiNucci, and I think there's a lot of different ways that you can stack him. I think double stacks are very in play. Honestly, I might force in all double stacks with DiNucci just based on the passing volume, because if he scores 25 DraftKings points, I'd be shocked if he didn't bring at least 2 wide receivers along with him. So yeah, what are your thoughts on this Seattle passing attack?
Yeah, I mean, he, like you said, a 70+% pass rate on a team with no tight ends, and they also didn't throw to their running backs really. You can mix and match basically any of the wide receivers. DiNucci will probably be popular, but nothing too crazy to where he's unplayable in any way. DiNucci plus like Josh Gordon, or like you could do that. You can do DiNucci plus Blake Jackson or Pearson, any of the receivers really. And I think you got to be careful with some of their pass catcher ownership and how you make your lineup different. But DiNucci will probably be my preferred quarterback play of the slate.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think like if you're going DiNucci plus Jacour Pearson plus Blake Jackson, you're going to need to get different.
Yeah, I would not do that.
No. Yeah, that's going to be the most popular double stack. So if you're playing something like that, you need to like get unique in another spot.
Yeah.
I wrote up Josh Gordon as being a solid leverage play because I think optimizers and a lot of people building by hand will be forced into playing either Jackson or Pearson because they're just better projected values industry wide.
Right.
And Gordon was sort of their downfield guy, and his volume was still pretty solid. He didn't quite see the target volume that Jackson and Pearson did, but he's getting targets down the field. So he could break a couple big plays, and you're probably getting him at half the ownership that Blake Jackson is going to be. So.
And half the ownership that he was just 1 week ago. Like
exactly. And he's not like a fundamentally different play this week by
No, and he didn't have a bad week last week at all.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean,
he didn't look. That's it.
Yeah. He's definitely overpriced, and I mean, he didn't look like the 2013 world-beating Josh Gordon, but I don't think anyone expected that. I mean, he's still one of the most talented wide receivers in the league. Jordan VC is $3K. He's projecting as a pretty strong value. That's, if you wanted to go with the most creative DiNucci double stack, it would be, DiNucci, Gordon plus Jordan VC. But, Gordon, Jackson, and Pearson are really the main three guys there who are going to see volume. What I'm kind of struggling with here is what to do with these Seattle running backs. Brendan Knox wasn't particularly high up in like weighted opportunity. He only had a 36% snap share, didn't run many routes. I think he'll get the red zone carries, but I also don't think there will be many red zone carries to go around. I think this is an offense that just wants to throw over and over again. So yeah, I'm really struggling with what to do with these Seattle running backs, and I guess it's really just Brendan Knox that we're talking about here. The pricing's pretty awkward at 6,400. I feel like I'd rather just either pay the extra money for Brian Hill or maybe pay down for a discount option. So yeah, I'm not sure if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, he's not somebody I'll feel great about clicking, but he's also probably means he makes some sense in some lineups. Like, I think if you are not playing DiNucci and you're kind of fading the Seattle passing attack, playing Brendan Knox makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Like they just, they get down to the 5-yard line or 1-yard line and he falls in the end zone. Like, it won't take much for him to pay off. I even think if you're playing the situation where the Seattle offense does roll, they pass a ton, you could play DiNucci plus Gordon plus Knox and just say, I hope I get all of the offensive points from this offense.
Yeah, I really like that. I mean, we saw in the first quarter of the Seattle game last week, DiNucci had, I think, a little bit over 100 yards. Like, I could definitely see a game where Seattle just absolutely rolls and puts up 40 on the board. And in that scenario, Knox could definitely fall into the end zone a couple times. And he could make for an interesting pairing with the Seattle defense if you think, St. Louis just totally drops the ball again like they did against San Antonio.
Yeah.
All right. So,
I was just going to say, he's not you don't necessarily want to play him, but he probably makes some sense in some different builds.
Yeah, right there with you. All right. Let's move on to the DC Defenders at the Las Vegas Vipers. This is a 7 p.m. Saturday kickoff with an over-under of 37. Las Vegas is favored by 3.5. I think that the DC side is pretty interesting for a couple reasons. The Galaxy Brain quarterback play of the week, not a guy I'm going overboard by any means, but I'm probably going to play around 30 teams in the big GPP this week, and I'm going to have them on one or two, and it's De'Aaron King. So last week, I know, in a league where, he's probably splitting reps with Jordan Ta'amu. So I'm just putting that out there. But he's 6,700, and last week we saw him come in, and he just really lit a spark for this DC offense. He looked great rushing the ball. I wrote him up in, the tournament plays article, and basically said if we spot him his 42-yard run that was called back due to penalty, extrapolate his rushing production out to a full game, he would have scored over 30 DraftKings points on rushing production alone, which is just absolutely insane. And I think that there is a very small chance that he could actually start this game and play every snap at quarterback because of how good he looked last week and how much better the DC offense looked with him at quarterback. With that said, I don't think it's very likely. Most likely we're going to see Ta'amu coming in for most of the passing plays, and then De'Aaron King coming in for a lot of the rushing stuff. But at 6,700, King could still get there on limited snaps, so I am fine trotting him out there on a few teams. I wouldn't worry about playing De'Aaron King if you're only playing 5 or 10 lineups.
No.
But if you're MMEing in any regard, I think he's a little interesting as like a mega Galaxy Brain play that's going to be 0% on the quarterback. I don't know if you have any other thoughts there, but I wanted to make my case for De'Aaron King.
I don't like this DC offense. If you said I had to play a DC QB, it probably would be King. I think Ta'amu is basically unplayable given his role, which is surprising that because we've seen him be productive in other spring leagues before, and have decent, not just like decent rushing numbers, decent passing numbers. And it's just, they really just do not want to run the ball. I mean, pass the ball at all. They had a 30% neutral situation pass rate last week. That is so low.
Yeah. And that was a game where Seattle got out to an early lead too. So just, really, really concerning stuff. And it's really strange because Te'amu is a good spring league quarterback, but he doesn't provide nearly as much juice on the ground as Derek King does. So I think that's the reason for the rotation. And it is very, I know we talked about this the other day, it's very reminiscent of what the New Jersey Generals were doing last year with Luis Perez and DeAndre Johnson. And I definitely got myself into trouble a couple of weeks playing a little too much DeAndre Johnson there. Moving on to running back, I think Abram Smith and Raquel Armstead are both a little interesting. Abram Smith, 70% snap share last week. Granted, it really didn't amount to much at all, only 5.3 weighted opportunity points. He did have a 54% route share, but I can't imagine either of these quarterbacks are going to be targeting running backs very often. And then just from the eye test, I thought Raquel Armstead looked really great. He looked super explosive. I mean, this is a guy who was in the NFL with Jacksonville previously. He's a little interesting at 4,600. There's another running back for Houston in a similar sort of price range that I actually like a lot more. But I think both DC running backs are interesting, and you could make a case for either guy.
Yeah, I don't think I have a major lean either way. I think both are fine. You're going to get great leverage if you're playing one of them either way. You're just betting on, really, even whether it's King, Abram Smith, or Armstead, you're just basically betting that they get a rushing touchdown at some point, and that's all you really need. Abram Smith is definitely a good running back, though. I liked him coming out of college. Thought he's a converted linebacker now playing running back. We've seen Raquel Armstead be decent in the NFL, so maybe that transitions as well. Yeah, I don't have, none of them are either of them are really my favorite plays at running back, but I think they both are fine if you need to get different in your lineup because you're playing chalkier options elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think that's pretty good analysis. The pass catchers on DC. I mean, this is like you said. I mean, a 38% pass rate is not great for any sort of receiver production. Lucky Jackson, I guess, is a little interesting. He projects okay. It's really hard to have a lot of faith in any of these guys' ceiling, but at 4,600, I think I can leave Lucky Jackson in my player pool, but I don't think I'm going to want much.
Yeah, Lucky Jackson was the only guy I wrote down as a viable pass catcher in this offense. 26% of the targets, 27% of the receiving yards. Those are good numbers. It's just not a large pie. But like we said, we've seen Te'amu be decent at throwing the football before. Maybe last week we don't want to overreact too much to last week. So Lucky Jackson is the only viable guy. And again, another solid leverage play that nobody's really going to play.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I do. I mean, I just have serious doubts about the TD equity of all these guys because I think, especially in the red zone, they're really just going to run the ball, and it's probably going to be Derek King, in a quarterback, and he's just not going to throw. He's going to run every play. So yeah, moving on to the Vegas side, I think, and industry-wide, this seems to be pretty close to consensus. We're probably going to get a bit of a quarterback rotation here with Luis Perez and Brett Hundley. It's tough because Perez could play the whole game. We saw him lead all quarterbacks in DraftKings scoring last week at 3% ownership. And, we might see similar ownership again this week, and we could have the exact same scenario play out where Hundley just doesn't get in the game. And that certainly makes Perez at least a little interesting, given the wide receiver talent he's surrounded with.
Yeah, he's despite throwing what did he throw, 2 pick sixes last week? And
I think he had 5 total touchdowns, right?
Yeah, I mean crazy stuff. But I'm probably just staying away from this quarterback room. It's just not worth it, I think. If you're doing mass multi-entry and you want to get a 3% of Perez or something, then by all means, I think that's fine. But other than that, I'm probably just staying away. There's QBs that are going to play most of the snaps, or even King, who we at least know is going to run the ball a lot, that I'd rather play. The receiving options are not bad. Mainly just Martavis Bryant, if I had to pick one. And I think he's actually probably one of my favorite leverage plays at receiver because of how kind of a down week he had last week, despite the peripheral numbers being pretty good, 25% target share, 34% of the air yards, but he had like a 44% catch rate, which is just terrible and probably not what he's going to normally post week to week. So just kind of hope that balances out a little bit. Maybe he catches a deep ball and like you said, maybe Hundley does play more than we think, and maybe he's a little bit better than Perez. We don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, last week, based on what I understand, Hundley was sort of late arriving to the team, so it wasn't necessarily like a talent issue as much as it was he just didn't fully understand.
He just didn't know the offense.
Yeah. So I think all these Las Vegas wide receivers are in play. I'm with you. I think Martavis Bryant is my favorite play overall. And I mean, they're all pretty expensive, but again, it's not hard to pay up for these guys given the wide receiver value that's on the board.
Right.
I think Jeff Badette goes a little over-owned after his huge game last week. So I'm probably going to mostly try to play Martavis Bryant and Geronimo Allison. Running back for Vegas is tough. I really don't like either guy. It feels similar to Seattle in that they're both sort of awkwardly priced and the usage isn't great. I mean, I'd rather play Brandon Knox than Rod Smith, but I'm not sure if you have a hard take on these Vegas running backs.
This is a total avoid situation for me. I mean, Lovett, Smith, and Torrey were all in the 20 to 33% range for rush share. There's really just no reason to play there. You only have to play one running back, and there's enough other solutions elsewhere that just makes so much more sense.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I mean, Rod Smith did get the red zone touches last week, but I mean, only 7, total opportunities. It's just really not good, especially at, what is he, like 6,700? I mean, you can do a lot better with that salary.
Yeah, so you basically need him to fall in the end zone at that point.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And Vegas seemed pretty willing to pass the ball. So I think, it's probably more likely that these touchdowns end up going to the wide receivers instead.
Yep.
All right. So moving on to these Sunday games, we've got our first kickoff 4 p.m. Sunday, the San Antonio Brahmas at the Orlando Guardians. The total here is 38.5. I know we haven't spent much time on betting stuff, but I thought this is pretty easily the best bet of the week, the under 38.5 in the San Antonio Orlando game. I think these are probably the 2 worst offenses in the XFL. I mean, at least you could make an argument that they are. I think Orlando definitely is the worst offense in the XFL. San Antonio didn't really impress me week 1, so I really like the under here. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
No, yeah, that makes sense. That's what, when looking at the, trying to project this game, I was struggling to see how you got to 38.5 points. And my only guess is maybe like Orlando does have a high pass rate in week 1. They had like a 74% pass rate.
But that was because they had to. I mean,
that was because they had to. Yeah. So I don't know if the bookmakers saw that high number and just thought maybe they did. Their early down pass rate was 75% as well. But yeah, it's the neutral situation, which they didn't get a ton of, was in the 50s. So they probably don't want to be a super pass happy team.
I'd be shocked if that's what they want to do, given their quarterback room. So
yeah, and we know. I mean, I think we can. Other than DC, San Antonio does not want to throw the ball at all, really.
Yeah. So starting on the San Antonio side, they are 3-point favorites here against Orlando. Jack Cohn is a little interesting, but I really don't think I want anything to do with him. I mean, he projects all right industry wide. I think he'll definitely catch some ownership, probably 15%. I'd be surprised if he pushes 20, but somewhere in that range. But yeah, I don't think I really want much to do with him. Like you said, this is just a team who really wants to run the ball. Kalen Ballage with 24 carries last week, plus 4 targets on a 53% snap share. Like, he played half the snaps and had 24 rushes, 19.2 weighted opportunity points, led all running backs. I think that's a much more interesting spot to sort of start this debate. I think Balaj probably goes way over-owned this week, but I mean, he is a strong play. We know the touches are going to be there. So yeah, do you have any thoughts on this? The quarterback situation, or these running backs for San
Antonio? I wish Cone wasn't as popular, like you said. That 15. Yeah. If I could get Cone at 10%, I'd like him a ton more. Just because, like we said, we don't think Orlando is very good. There's a chance San Antonio can move the ball, even if it is on the ground, but maybe he throws some touchdowns here and there. He looked fine in his first game. Nothing special, but again, QBs that are playing 100% of their team snap is kind of you get a boost right from that. It's just, if you're telling me he gets anywhere close to some of these other QBs in ownership, it's tough. He's a tough click. Balaj is probably the highest, if not the highest owned, one of the top 3 highest owned players on the slate. For good reason. He's the workhorse back of the XFL right now. He's getting, like you said, most of the opportunities. I'm probably fine playing him at that high of ownership and just choosing to get different elsewhere. There's just so many other places you can get different. We don't want to, people are going to overreact to things they saw in week 1 and think we know a lot more than we do about this league, and we just don't. So, but Balaj getting as much work as we do is probably something we can bet on pretty safely and just try to get different elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think between Balaj and Brian Hill, I definitely want Brian Hill. I think you're going to get Brian Hill at a bit of an ownership discount. I think people might be a little scared off by his, just general touch numbers or snap numbers, especially compared to Balaj. So yeah, they're almost the exact same price. So yeah, if you're deciding between those guys, I think Brian Hill is clearly the better play.
Yeah, I'd rather play Hill over Balaj if I was picking between the two, but Balaj is totally in play even at high ownership. Yeah, I think Jaquiz Patrick is also a little bit interesting if you're not playing Balaj and you're just kind of betting on, him getting the rushing touchdown. He had decent work. He had 25% of the carries.
44% of snaps, 44% of routes. He could get some red zone touches there. So he's definitely a decent leverage play. I'm right there with you. I think that's pretty sharp. If you want to, if you really want to stay away from Balaj, I would definitely be looking at some Patrick exposure there. These San Antonio pass catchers, I don't have a ton of optimism about overall. I think Fred Brown is a really strong play. I believe he's only 3,200. We sort of expect him to slot into that Landon Akers role. Last week, Akers had 7 targets on an ADOT of 0.0, like pretty much all swing passes and screens. So they obviously want a slot guy who they can get the ball out quick to, and I think that will be Fred Brown this week. And he sort of falls into the category of the half dozen or so, sub 4K wide receivers who are just excellent values.
Yeah, he's in general, just as the receivers as a whole, I'm probably never playing more than one of them in a lineup, even if I have Cone as my QB.
Yeah.
They just don't pass enough. He's probably, he might be my favorite of the super cheap value QBs because he doesn't look like he's going to be super popular. And like you said, he's just falling right into that slot role. The other guys are all fine. Tolliver is okay. I don't know if I'd play anybody else though.
Yeah, no one really projects well enough to jump out. I mean, I think if you're MMEing, a little bit of Travis Johnson or TJ Vasher might make some sense. They're not very good values, but okay enough that it's, you don't have to totally get rid of them. I think for me, I'm pretty much only looking at Fred Brown here in terms of the pass catchers. Elise Mack projects well, but I'm not optimistic about the upside of a tight end in this offense. So I will probably be staying away there. All right. Moving on to the Orlando side of things. I mean, goodness, quarterback is just an absolute disaster for the Guardians. We saw Paxton Lynch and Quentin Dormady last week. Paxton Lynch looked terrible. Dormady looked okay-ish. He had a long touchdown. I mean, we could legitimately see a 3-quarterback rotation this week, which is just, I mean, it's disgusting.
Yeah, there's not really much to say about it. They're like,
no, yeah,
for DFS purposes, nothing. If they did, Dormady is the guy I hope they kind of consolidate on. I think he's got the best chance at being viable in fantasy and also just in actual football.
Yeah.
But until even then, we would need to see this be a better offense as a whole before us to really care about any of these quarterbacks.
Yep. Yeah, I'm totally with you there. You don't have to worry about any of these Orlando quarterbacks for DFS purposes this week. Jermaine Martin is pretty clearly the lead back here for Orlando. Granted, he did only log 48% of snaps, and he didn't necessarily score very well in weighted opportunity. I don't have a lot of optimism for this offense at all. While I think, Jermaine Martin is the guy that they want to get the most backfield touches to, he's just too expensive. And I think that there are much better leverage spots at running back. So I'm totally fine fading him. I'm not sure if you have any other thoughts on this backfield.
Probably not playing him this week. Just like you said, there's enough other places you can play guys and get leverage.
Yeah. Pass catcher, though, for Orlando is actually pretty interesting, just given how cheap some of their top receiving options are. Cody Latimer is a guy that I wrote up. I mean, he scored 17 DraftKings points last week in a half of action before, he ended up getting hurt. And from what I can tell, he's completely healthy now, expected to play. He's not projecting very well industry-wide, which I kind of think is a mistake. I think they want to get this guy the ball. I mean, former NFL wide receiver who's now playing sort of like a gimmicky, like H-back role for them. From what I could tell, he was lining up at receiver quite a bit, but they were also doing a little bit of tight end stuff with him. I think he's a pretty strong play as the sub 4K guys go. And, I might play 15 or 20% Cody Latimer this week.
Really? Okay.
I think he's pretty strong. And this is we got to keep in mind too, this is a game, I expect Orlando to struggle. I think they're going to have to throw. And, if we assume Quentin Dormady gets most of these reps, the passing offense might not be awful. That's my bull case for Latimer.
I'm surprised he's looking as not popular as he is. I would have thought his big game last week would have put him in that close to double-digit range, in which case I would think he'd be a fine play, but not. Yeah, at low single digits, I think he's definitely a solid play. I like taking shots at pretty much Charleston Rambo, Eli Rogers, or Cody Latimer for this offense. I don't know. I don't think I have a preferred favorite like you do with Latimer, but I think all of them are solid options this week.
Yeah, Eli Rogers is projecting industry-wide as a really strong value. I mean, only 3,100, and he looks like he's going to play quite a bit. So he's a pretty solid option. And then Charleston Rambo sort of falls under the same category as a guy like maybe Marcel Aitman, where he's clearly overpriced. He doesn't project particularly well, but I mean, that's going to keep his ownership down. And it's really not hard to find the salary to be able to pay up for a guy like that. Obviously, I prefer Aitman. But yeah, I'm more than fine with Rambo.
Weird. He had such a low air yard share in ADOT. He was more of their short yardage area receiver when he definitely is played on the outside, more of a bigger guy. You would think more like Aitman, but not how he was really used in week one. So maybe that changes, maybe it doesn't, but I think he's a solid option as well.
Yeah. Sort of an interesting contrarian play there, just given that he's, just not a good value. But yeah, if I were power ranking these guys, it'd be Latimer, Rogers, and then probably a gap, and then Rambo there. You can totally get away with not playing any Rambo at all.
Yeah.
But Latimer and Rogers are both very strong values. All right. So moving on to the final game of the week. We've got the Arlington Renegades at the Houston Roughnecks. This is a 7 p.m. kickoff on Sunday. The over-under here is 40.5, and Houston is favored by 5.5 at some books. I've seen 4.5 at other places. I actually got 3.5 right when the week started, which I'm super happy about. Honestly, I'm fine taking Houston -4.5. I think this is by far the best offense in the XFL. They're just going to put a ton of points on the board, and I'm not particularly optimistic about Arlington. I'm not sure if you have any betting takes on this game.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I saw early in the week when you said you thought it would close closer to Houston -5-ish, and that's pretty much what looks like is going to happen.
Yep.
Yeah, they're definitely the better team, probably the best team in the XFL. Arlington, I don't really know what to think of Arlington yet. They're mixing multiple quarterbacks in. Doesn't really, Sal Cannella is a solid player. They don't really have a lot to look great about, but Houston looks like they're gonna try to put up points no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, AJ Smith, the Houston offensive coordinator, is like I am in love with this guy. So like when I wrote up the week 1 preview and I was looking into AJ Smith and sort of what he had done throughout his career, this is a guy who had only coached like pretty much high school and junior college football, but everywhere he went, his quarterbacks, his wide receivers were putting up record numbers. I think if you look through the Louisiana State high school record book, I mean, a lot of the all-time record holders are guys that were coached by AJ Smith. And you hear him talk, and basically all he says is, we want to throw the ball. Like one of his quotes in an interview that I heard this past week was, I have people come up to me and they say, oh, we're so efficient running the ball. Why don't we run more? And I say, well, we're efficient running the ball because we pass so much. So they're just not going to get away from throwing, which is something to love. The Houston Roughnecks currently favored for the XFL title. Hopefully a few of you guys manage to tail me and get Houston +600, because I can't imagine we're seeing those odds again anytime soon. Moving on to some DFS takes, though. Drew Plitt is only 8,000. He projects pretty well industry-wide. But my issue is that I kind of think he's going to go over-owned because, like I said, he is a pretty solid value at quarterback. There's the risk, Kyle Sloter could rotate in there. And, we saw Arlington only a 48% pass rate in week 1, which is just like really concerning, especially given that they were losing to Las Vegas for a decent portion of that game. So I think if Plitt's going to get close to 20% ownership, that's just a really tough click for me. I'm not sure if you have a take there.
Yeah, he falls into a similar bucket as Cohen to me. It's basically those two. Like, I'd either rather get up to DiNucci and Silvers and eat a little bit of chalk at QB, or drop down to McCarron and just go with a more heavy leverage spot at QB. And then you've got Plitt and Cohen in the middle, and they don't have the upside of the slightly more chalkier guys, but they're also not giving me the same leverage that like McCarron is. So he probably is my 4th QB of the week when you factor in projection and ownership.
I prefer him to Jack Cohn, but man, he's just a really tough click when you tell me, I only have to eat like 5 or 7% more ownership and $600 more salary to get up to a guy like Brandon Silvers, who we'll get to shortly, who's he's just a much better play than Plitt is. But to be fair, on the Arlington side, I do think there are some very strong plays. And it really starts with Davion Smith. Only 5,700. He was second in weighted opportunity last week, 75% snap share, 60% route share, 18 total opportunities. I mean, very clearly the top running back value of the week. He's going to be really popular, but I can't really find a good reason to get off of him. I mean, I think this is a game, he's pretty clearly the guy Arlington wants to play in passing situations. Keith Ford is definitely live for these red zone touches, which is a concern if you're playing Davion Smith. Keith Ford could steal these TDs. But at the same time, I kind of expect Arlington to get blown out here. And, that probably means Davion Smith plays, a lot, runs a lot of routes, and, could be right up there for the league lead in targets this week at the running back position.
Yeah, you pretty much said it as the reason why I might not want to play him. It's the red zone work and the goal
Yeah.
line work. I mean, Plitt had more rushes than Devion Smith in the red zone last week, which is not great, especially for none of these running backs are like super highly efficient guys,
Yeah.
and touchdowns are going to matter a lot. So, man, if he's the most popular running back, I really do want to, I think, get off of him in most lineups.
Mhm.
If I am playing him, you just got to be conscious of the ownership and make sure you're getting different. You can't play the Seattle passing attack with Devion Smith. Probably not a great
Yeah.
idea. So yeah, I think, and because of that, Keith Ford is viable. That maybe they get in the red zone twice and he gets 2 touchdowns somehow.
Yeah, Ford. I mean, Ford is overpriced. He does not project very well, but at the same time, I mean, no one's going to play him. He's probably going to be 1 or 2% owned. And yeah, like you said, he could fall into the end zone. So, there is a pretty good argument for fading Devion Smith there. And again, I mean, like, 5,700 at his projection, like it looks great, obviously. But when you factor in all the wide receiver value that we have this week, he's really not too difficult to get off of.
Right. I'd rather play Balaj or Hill over him.
Yeah. I think I line up Balaj. I'm a little more iffy on, but definitely Hill. I think is a much stronger tournament play. So yeah, there is a little bit more fragility than his projection might suggest there. On the pass catching side of things, there's 2 pretty clear top options for Arlington. I mean, Sal Cannell is their top wide receiver. He's listed as a tight end, but he's effectively a wide receiver. I believe he played wide receiver in college at Auburn. If you played any USFL DFS, you know who this guy is. And this is the same offense that carried Donald Parham in 2020 to about 15 DraftKings points per game. So, Canella is one of the top receiver plays of the slate. He's going to be really popular. You could certainly argue he's going to go over-owned. At 6,500, he's not like a screaming value by any means, but he's a pretty strong play. And then you have Tyler Vaughns, who's honestly looking like their lead receiver after Canella. And he's only 3,000, which is just absolutely insane. Right there is one of the top values on the board. So yeah, I'm not sure if you have any additional thoughts on these pass catchers, but I think, Vaughns is pretty clearly just an awesome value play, top 5 wide receiver value. And then Canella is also a pretty strong play.
Yeah, Vaughns should be the most popular option of their pass catching weeks, and he's not. So yeah, he's definitely an awesome play. Canella is also a good play, but yes, like you said, going to be popular, which pushes me. It's just like I don't know. I just would rather play Vaughns if I'm picking a Houston receiver. And I don't know how many or Arling. Sorry, wrong team.
you're good. New league, we're still learning.
Yeah, we're still learning, still remembering what teams.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I don't know how many I do think big game stacks of this game make sense with the highest over under. So there's worlds where you could play multiple Arlington pass catchers with Plitt at QB and then load up with Houston guys as well.
Yeah, if you are playing Plitt, I think you have to play Houston players. I don't think there's any room for anything else there. You have to game stack if you're playing Plitt.
Yes. Yeah, and then we saw some higher scoring games last week in general, but these are not good offenses. Like they could very easily be that one game shoots out and you have 4 or 5 guys from that game, and that's what you needed to take it down. So
exactly, yeah. And it's really interesting because last year with USFL stuff, like game stacks or double stacking, it just wasn't as important because these teams were not throwing very much.
Right.
I think league wide, the USFL pass rate was something like 55%. In XFL week 1, it was close to 70. It was just awesome. So you can definitely get more aggressive with double stacking and game stacks than maybe I even originally thought. Coming into this new league. Moving on to the Houston side of things. I kind of just love everyone on the team as a play. I think basically, the top 8 guys on Houston are all viable plays. Brandon Silvers is the top quarterback play of the slate. You could argue, he's tied with DiNucci. Maybe you could make a case that DiNucci is a slightly better play, but Silvers is only 8,600. Houston is going to throw the ball probably 70% of the time. And Silvers led all quarterbacks with at least 20 attempts in average depth of target. So not only is he throwing a ton, but he's pushing the ball downfield, which I think is just absolutely awesome. The one thing that is a little iffy with Silvers is that Cole McDonald did get some reps near the end of last week's game. I'm not sure if the blowout script had something to do with it, but it was at least a little concerning that McDonald's reps came at the goal line. They wanted to give him, some read options and stuff. So Silvers could lose a little TD equity if he gets subbed out for McDonald. And I suppose if he were to play bad enough, there would be a real benching risk there. Because I think the coaching staff does actually like Cole McDonald.
Yeah, it really stinks that they are working in McDonald's. You would love to just be able to load up on Silvers and think that, he's their guy and whatever. So we'll see what they, as the weeks go on, if that does start to split more and more, which, man, that would just really suck for the best offense in the league right now. So, but for now, like you said, Silvers is probably the best play on the slate, maybe tied with DiNucci at worst. And yeah, he's a very good play, and you don't have to get super contrarian everywhere to be able to play him. He's not going to be super crazy popular.
Exactly. Yeah. So the Houston running back situation, I think, is extremely interesting. And, it really presents an interesting leverage spot for this slate because Max Borghi, week one, he looked like baby CMC, the XFL's version of Christian McCaffrey. He looked great rushing the ball. They were clearly trying to get him some design looks in the passing game. The only problem, though, was that he only played 46% of snaps, and he ran a route on 19% of dropbacks. 12 total opportunities. He ended up finishing the week third in weighted opportunity. So his workload is solid. Last week, I called him the best play of the slate at only 4,500 and, about 30% ownership. I thought, he's pretty close to a lock button play. The problem this week is that he's 8,000 and, he's probably going to be about 30% owned again. So the whole, baby CMC thing it's pretty priced in, which to me opens the door to Dejoun Lee actually being a pretty strong leverage play. Lee played 42% of snaps and earned 17% of routes, which is, pretty similar to what Borghi did. Lee also had 6 out of the 5 red zone opportunities in this backfield. So Lee is definitely live to score. He's only 4,200. He's not projecting for any ownership at all. I actually think Dejoun Lee is like a really interesting contrarian running back play if you want to pay down at the position.
Yeah, I think Lee's my favorite running back play of the slate. He's when you factor in price, ownership, and there's no reason that the ownership gap should be basically 0 and 25% for Borghi. And the price gap is also double. Lee might not be in every lineup that I make, but it's going to make it very hard for me to want to play Borghi. Because just knowing that, all right, if I'm playing a Houston running back, why wouldn't I play the one that is going to be basically unowned and didn't see much less of a workload than Borghi saw last week?
Yeah. I definitely understand where you're coming from there. I still really like Borghi. Honestly, I think that there's certainly scenarios where both running backs end up getting there.
That's not a bad idea if you want to play both.
That's you could play all chalk plus both Houston running backs and just hope Houston scores 50 points and they end up going a little run heavy.
Oh, I actually like that a lot. I did not think of that.
I still do like Borghi as a play. I wouldn't get completely off Borghi because again, Houston is live to score 40. So Borghi is still a strong play, even if he is maybe a little overpriced and overowned. Nick Holley is also listed as a running back for Houston. He's not playing running back. He's playing wide receiver. Some sites actually have him as a really strong value this week. I'm not sure if I necessarily agree with that. I think the addition of Justin Smith to this wide receiver group kind of pushes Holley down the pecking order a little bit. He had 33 routes in week 1. I don't expect, the same number of routes this week. But I mean, 3,000, he's live for, 2, 3, 4 targets. And if you really need salary savings at running back, I do think Nick Holley is, at least in play, but I certainly prefer Dejoun Lee and Borg even to Holley, because Holley could zero. I mean, he had a 0 last week. He could very easily post a 0 this week. I don't think he'll catch much ownership, though, probably only 3 or 4%.
No.
So
if you're playing like 4 other wide receivers and need like 4 expensive wide receivers and need a cheap running back, he's fine. Other than that, like if he's not my only running back in my lineup, I'd rather play one of the cheaper wide receivers in my flex than him.
Almost all the cheap, 3-ish K wide receivers are stronger values projected.
Right, exactly.
Better overall. All right, these Houston wide receivers, I think this is really interesting. We still don't know if Justin Smith is going to play for Houston, but in an interview this past week, AJ Smith, the Houston offensive coordinator, basically said, he talked about Jontre Kirkland and Deontay Burnett as their top wide receivers, but then he also said, Justin Smith is another guy who we are super excited about, and we cannot wait to showcase his abilities. Justin Smith, only 3,300. If he plays, he's pretty clearly the top wide receiver value among these Houston wide receivers. But at the same time, I mean, Deontay Burnett, Jontre Kirkland, and Travel Harris are all outstanding plays in an offense like this. So I think all 4 are more than fine. I'm not sure if you have a strong take on who you like the most. I think I'm just going to mix it up a lot with my Silvers lineups. I'll probably mostly double stack and just add in some randomness there and hope for the best.
Yeah, it's hard to pick. It is hard to pick a favorite of this this group. We're giving Smith like an 18% target share right now, assuming he plays. If he does not play, that obviously is going to spread out. Maybe Nick Holley looks a little bit better, but it's mostly going to spread out to the other receivers and whatnot. Burnett is probably my favorite if I'm not playing a ton of lineups and I'm not, playing a ton of Houston in general. There's a good argument to be made that you should have like a Houston either player or receiver in like every lineup, and just mix and match. What does ownership look like for the Houston pass catchers? Anything?
I think they're all going to be pretty popular. I think Justin Smith especially will get quite a bit of steam as long as we get confirmation that he's actually playing. The lowest owned guy should be Travel Harris. So, that's fine. I mean, I don't know. I honestly, I'm not too concerned with ownership here. I just think they're all great plays. And in most of my lineups where I'm like double stacking Houston, I'm probably looking at just getting different somewhere else. Another option too is, and I think this will be, fairly unique, is going like Silvers plus one of these Houston running backs, plus a receiver. That's definitely in play, but yeah, they're all like, all these pass catchers are really great plays. I had a lot of optimism for tight end Garrett Owens coming into the season, but he only ran 6 rounds in week 1. Converted running back, like 6'3", 230. I was like, oh man, this guy could do some damage, but he's just not playing. But yeah, to put a bow on it, I think all these Houston pass catchers are really great plays. I like both the running backs. You could make a solid argument for Nick Holley, and hopefully Brandon Silvers just actually plays close to every snap. That's really your only risk with stacking Houston a bunch.
Yep. Yeah. As long as no one guy is getting crazy ownership, don't worry about it too much. And just look at the rest of your lineup and kind of make them fit however you need to not be too chalky or too over leveraged in either direction.
Yep. All right. So I just wanted to wrap things up with maybe a minute or two of like macro thoughts on the slate. One thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to put a setting in like max 2 running backs in every lineup. They're, the wide receivers pretty much across the board in the XFL have better upside. The running backs project pretty well. So if you just put projections into an optimizer and hit optimize, you're going to get a lot of lineups that are cheap wide receivers and then these expensive running backs. So that'll sort of be like the base build, so to speak. Getting away from that is, in any capacity is probably a good idea. And honestly, I think you can play a ton of lineups that are only one running back with 4 wide receivers. You get a lot of upside there. I think both of my solid weeks that I had in USFL last year, and keep in mind USFL much lower pass rate than XFL. Both my solid weeks came from lineups that I believe play 4 wide receivers. So I'm not sure if you have any like slate wide sort of like macro thoughts, but I think that's pretty important, is to avoid lineups with 3 running backs. You're just not going to get there.
Yep, I was thinking the same thing regarding running backs. I'm probably not really MMEing. I'm mostly single entry 3 max type lineups.
Yep.
I'm probably going to have at least one lineup. If I'm making 10 lineups, probably maybe half of them are going to be pretty heavy game stacks of this Houston Arlington or Seattle St. Louis game. I think there's a good chance this week that a lot of the best players come from one of those 2 games, and just trying in general not playing a ton of guys from those other 2 games, and just trying to be over the field on my lineup having multiple guys from a high scoring game than not. There's only 4 games, so you don't need a lot to go wrong in 3 other games for you to just nail the one game.
Game stacks are even more powerful on shorter 4-game slates like these.
Yep. Yeah, and with like you said, with the pass rates we saw in week 1, that's much more viable than we saw in the USFL, where it's just you basically just had to have the right guy from every game, and it's much harder to game stack when it's like that.
Yeah, I think the leverage opportunities in XFL are just going to be way better, which should make DFS a lot more fun. It looks like the big tournament this week is going to overlay, so this is going to be an awesome week to just fire a ton of entries. I am super excited for the slate of games, and I am very grateful for everyone who tuned in to the first ever Fantasy Points XFL breakdown. For myself, for Chris, for Sean behind the glass, thank you so much, guys, and I will see you at the top of the leaderboard.